Good evening. Welcome to the League of Women Voters St. Paul House District 65A Candidate Forum. My name is Lori Sukup, and as Sig mentioned, I'm a member of the League of Women Voters White Bear Lake area. And with me tonight is Deb Brinkman. Neither of us are constituents of 65A. St. Paul Neighborhood Network is filming this forum tonight, and the broadcast times are written on the board behind us. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan volunteer organization of women and men organized at the local, state, and national levels. LWV follows well-established guidelines that the candidates were given and you have in your program today. Please reference these if you have any questions or concerns. Candidates will have 2 minutes for opening and closing statements and 1 minute to respond to each question. Candidates begin in alphabetical order and then will be called upon at random. We are accepting questions for the candidates at the registration table. These questions will be sorted by our screening committee and given to me, the moderator. The purpose is to ensure that questions are asked of all candidates and similar questions are grouped together. If you are interested in learning more about the League of Women Voters or interested in joining, please stop by the registration table. And please double check and make sure that your phones are off or silenced. I'm pleased to introduce our candidates this evening for House District 65A. They are Lena Buggs, Anthony Meschke, and Rena Moran. We will begin opening statements with Lena Buggs.
Thank you. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this debate and inviting all three candidates to participate. This is an important election. This is one of the few elections where we have three candidates. My name's Lena Buggs. I live in the Lexington-Hamlin neighborhood, right across the street from Concordia's baseball field. And I'm a Green Party endorsed candidate. And I'm running in direct opposition to the corporate-owned two-party system of the Democrats and the Republicans. I am also running because I feel as though people weren't represented at the state legislature this year. There was a lot of legislation that didn't get passed. There wasn't a jobs bill, a comprehensive jobs bill to get our people back to work and employed. There wasn't really a comprehensive bill for education to close the achievement gap. The Toxic Kids Act wasn't enacted. That legislation didn't get passed. And the disparities in our district are phenomenal right now. We have the worst disparities for education, for health, for jobs. So I'm running to reinstitute jobs, bring back the jobs, $15 an hour jobs. I'm also wanting to bring sustainable housing and housing that doesn't use credit as a discriminatory practice to keep people from home ownership. I'm looking forward to answering your questions. I'm looking forward to being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony Meschke.
Hi, I just want to start by saying that I believe everyone here is smart, capable, and responsible, and you don't need a politician telling you what to do. I'm a Marine and I served 4 years active duty, and I married my wife Rose right back there 4 years ago. We have a 15-month-old daughter and we have a son that's due in December. So when I get into office, I don't have a bunch of pet projects or a bunch of pet laws that I want to pass. I have a bunch of laws that I want to eliminate that I feel are infringing on everyone's freedom. I want to stop spending money on stadiums such as the Vikings Stadium. I want to decriminalize all forms of weed. I don't think the government should be involved in dealing with victimless crimes. I want to legalize fireworks. I want to stop corporate welfare. I want to legalize raw milk. And I want to make sure the roads are clear of ice in the winter. That's one thing that we've definitely been failing on in the last couple winters here. Legalizing Sunday liquor and Sunday car sales, stop closing private businesses. And I want to give schools the ability to employ teachers based on performance instead of just seniority in a union. Every parent should have the freedom and responsibility to take care of their children, what their children learn in school, what their children eat in school, and what's injected into their children. I'm I don't want the government to force people to buy things. I'm sick of the government spying on everyone's phone calls and everyone's messages. The government should stop killing people without a trial or jury, and they should stop putting people in prison for victimless crimes. Rena Moran's voting record over the last couple of years, she's voted against the right of self-defense on your own property with Bill HF 1467. She voted against fireworks, which was 1694. Rena gave the state the authority to store a baby's blood without the parental consent. That was 2047. And she voted against paying off the school debt. That was HF 2083. And she voted to employ teachers based solely on seniority instead of performance. She voted for higher property taxes, HF 2337. And she voted to give $350 million of your taxpayer money to the Vikings, which with HF 2958. And she voted to unionize child daycares. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rena Moran, and I am the current state legislator for District 65A. But I'm also a mother in this community. Actually, I live right behind the Rondo Library on Aurora Avenue. I am a homeowner. Actually, I got my first piece of activism on Aurora Avenue when the Rondo Library was being built, and they wanted to come through and pave my block. And I came home one evening and realized that they had only paid half the block, and began to knock doors on my neighbor's door for a petition to have the city come back and pave the whole block. And if you go down that street, it is now paved. So very connected to the community, very connected to community organizers, to community organizations, and really work really hard to create laws and policies that represent all of us at the state level. I have had the privilege and the honor over the last 4 years to represent the families in District 65A. I've had the privilege to author 52 bills and be the co-author of 225 bills. But I really work hard to really to be a fighter for racial, social, and economic justice, but also to bring the community into the process of raising their voice, being a part of the process, engaging in the process, and bringing that information back to the community so that we collectively can create the change that we want. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first question will be directed to Rena Moran, followed by Lena Buggs. And it is, where do you think there is currently irresponsible government spending, and what is your plan to address it?
Where do I think there's irresponsible spending? Well, what I can say is that over the last 2 years, we've had the privilege of raising taxes on the top 2%. And when we did that, we was able to make some great investment. The first investment that we made was a historical investment in education. From early childhood education to all-day K to freezing college tuition for 2 years. So I'm not a strong advocate to say that we have did a lot of wasteful spending. I would say we have done over the last 2 years a lot of good investment in the people's lives in the state of Minnesota.
Thank you. Lena Buggs?
Well, actually, this past legislative session, I don't even know where to begin. There was so much wasteful spending. First, we can start with the Viking Stadium. $975 million of corporate welfare was given to Ziggy Wolf and the Vikings, a losing franchise. That money could have gone to jobs and economic development. There was wasteful spending in the enactment of MNsure, which is watered down, ineffective policy making. 15% of our residents here, they don't have health insurance. And also in transportation, $950 million plus in commuter rail and light rail. I only have 30 seconds left, but thank you.
Thank you. Anthony Meschke?
Yeah, I'd like to start with the Viking Stadium, the Senate office building. There's so many unelected bureaucracies that are taking your tax money and giving it to other people. We should rein that in and bring the government's decision-making back to the elected officials instead of some bureaucratic boards who are deciding where to spend money. Rena said it was her privilege to tax the rich. I don't think taking money from people with force is a privilege that the government should be exercising. I think we have to be very careful when we start taking money out of people's income. And then another wasteful spending, the Minsure, how many millions were spent on the ads of a blue ox running around? I mean, that is your taxpayer money. If a program's so good, people are gonna find it. You shouldn't have to advertise, hey, come over here, we're gonna spend $1 million, and you're gonna come over here, we're gonna give you all this free stuff that other people paid for. So I think there's a lot of wasteful programs out there. There's a lot of fraud. The government is not watching our tax money efficiently.
Thank you. Our second question will be directed first to Anthony Meschke, followed by Rena Moran. And the question is, what is your position on the $15 minimum wage?
I guess minimum wage. In the state, there's a lot of unemployment. There's a lot of unemployment in this district. I think the state should be focusing on the unemployment and getting people a job before they start trying to force a wage on someone. I'm sure the next two are going to say cost of living. I want someone to tell me what my cost of living is. Can the government tell me how much I need to make to live? Can the government tell me how much I'm worth an hour? I don't believe they can. So I think when we give the government the ability to put a minimum wage, we give them the ability to put a maximum wage, and I don't believe the government should be doing that. There's a lot of things out there. The unions back the minimum wage because when you make the minimum wage $15 an hour, if somebody's disabled or just straight lazy and can't make $15 an hour value for a corporation, they're going to go out and hire a higher skilled wage or a higher skilled employee. So we're disenfranchising the poor and unskilled workers by enacting this $15 minimum wage.
Thank you. Rena Moran?
Yeah, well, over the last 2 years, again, we have worked towards raising the minimum wage. And yes, I believe that it is not enough. I believe that we have to get to the place where we are providing the citizens of the state livable wages, and $15 could be considered a livable wage. So I would definitely advocate that. But at this moment, we are at a good place right now, a good start. And looking at opposition from many of the members in the House of Representatives, it was really a struggle to get them to do the right thing. When we invest in families and creating a livable wage and increasing the minimum wage, what happens is that they spend that money and grow our economy. And so I would advocate strongly for a livable wage.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Rena Moran, followed by Anthony Meschke.
I'm sorry, I don't think I got a chance to respond to that.
I'm sorry, Lena.
That's quite all right. Many of you know because I've knocked on your doors, and I want to thank each and every one of you for signing my petition for me to be on the November ballot. But many of you know that I am a big proponent of a $15 cost of living wage. Notice I said cost of living wage as opposed to minimum wage, because minimum wage does suggest that, barely enough to get by. Now, let's remember, it wasn't workers asking for exorbitant pay raises that got us into this debacle. It was the greed of Wall Street and the greed of corporations. Now, we're not talking about corporations who make under $5,000, small businesses. We're talking about big corporations here in Minnesota. They can afford to pay cost of living wages. It's a privilege to do business in the state of Minnesota. It isn't a right. Thank you.
Thank you. And now our third question will begin with Rena Moran, followed by Anthony Meschke. And the question is, what is your position on single-payer health care?
Wow, my first election, I was definitely an advocate for single payer, and today I am still a strong advocate for single payer. The last 2 years we had did the responsible thing to really pass the Affordable Care Act, but there's much more that we need to do. I would like to say that the single payer at the state legislative level is called the Minnesota Health Plan. That would be House File 76, in which I was a co-author of that bill. John Marty in the Senate has been a champion of single payer. I would say he was our leading champion and still is our leading champion in the Senate on single payer. And in the House, that champion over previous years, including the last 2 years, has been Representative Curlin Lane. But so much like Senator John Marty and also Representative Curlin Lane, I am
Thank you.
a strong advocate.
Thank you. Next to Anthony Meschke.
Yeah, I think health insurance, you should be able to go across state lines to get health insurance. When we're limiting health insurance to one single state, no single state has the best option for every single person within that state. So we need to open that up, much like vehicle insurance or house insurance. I don't believe the government should be able to force anyone to buy anything. And when we give them that ability, we give them the ability to force you to buy anything else. So I think we have to be very careful with that. I'm talking about a single-payer healthcare system. Let's look at the VA. I'm a veteran, so I watch the VA scandal very closely. The government, when we give the government the ability over people's health, the government starts focusing on measures and how good they're doing and how many people they're getting through the door. They aren't actually worried about getting people healthy. They're just worried about getting numbers through the door so they can get their pay raises based on issues like that. So we have to be very careful when we do that. And we should let people choose how much insurance they want covered or not. We should allow preemptive medical care, chiropractic or healthy eating, healthy checkups like that. We should let people pay for that.
Thank you. Lena Buggs.
I'm a big proponent of single-payer health care. My opponent, Ms. Moran, sits on the Health and Human Services Committee. You have to introduce this type of legislation. I think that with single-payer health care, our residents could benefit from that because the government isn't the employer, they're just the plan administrator. Also, deductibles would go away, and so would co-pays. And with 15% of the residents in our district uninsured, and MNsure is a broken system, I think we need single-payer health care, and I will go on record by saying if elected, I will introduce that type of legislation, and I will work with Senator John Marty to do so.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Lena Buggs, followed by Anthony Meschke. The question is, Education in 65 serves many diverse students. How would you evaluate the education they get and how it translates to employment?
Our education system is broken. We have some of the worst disparities under the current power structure and under the current leadership. 23% of our residents have a high school education. So we have to do something about closing the achievement gap. I'm a big proponent of full service schools that would be inclusive of adult education, partnerships beginning at the high school level. I think that we need to have those partnerships come in and have apprenticeship programs so that within a period of 18 months, if someone doesn't go off to college, they enter into a career.
Thank you. Anthony?
I think we need to stop focusing on the race of the child and learn how the child is learning in school. We've been going through this government indoctrinated school for the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and it's not working. We have huge education gaps. It's time that we start trying something different. Instead of throwing more money at the problem, we need to give teachers, parents, and school boards the ability to figure out how the students are learning best. Every student's different. My child is different than everyone else's child in how they're learning, and we need to give the teachers and the parents the ability to do that. Rena Moran voted to not pay off the school debt, which isn't helping the issue, and she also voted to only employ teachers based on seniority. That's direct payback to the unions. And we need to start focusing on teachers' pay based on their performance. That gives them incentives to teach the children how to learn better. They should be employed based on their evaluations by their peers and the school board and the students and the parents. I mean, that's how we're going to get the best teachers for our children and not some Washington, D.C. bureaucracy, including No Child Left Behind and Common Core.
Thank you. Rena Moran?
Thank you. I believe we can all say that education is the path to bringing kids out of poverty. It's a generational structural piece that can happen if our kids are graduating in higher numbers. I authored legislation that led to the state of Minnesota to make some historical investment in multi-generational poverty. It is legislation that really is about every organization, every mom, every dad, every business, every neighbor. We're all in educating a child in the neighborhood, especially a neighborhood that looks like District 65A, from cradle to career. I would just like to share with you that there was over 300 children in the neighborhood through this bill that have received some St. Paul Promise Neighborhood Early Learning Scholarship, putting them on the path to be ready for kindergarten, and I am committed to getting children a fair start. And lastly, I have to look at the Jackson Elementary School, which is part of that Promise Neighborhood where.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Anthony Meschke, followed by Lena Buggs. The question is, what is your position on making higher education more accessible for immigrants?
More accessible for immigrants? Once again, that would be the government looking at the race and the immigration status of people. We should be focusing on giving the schools the ability to choose what they're teaching and how they're teaching, how they're employing their teachers, and what students they're allowing to go to their school. The government this should not have a monopoly over the school system. And when the government is giving money, they're guaranteeing these loans to these students. The students are, they don't care what they're getting low interest rates, so they're going to take the money. They don't really care where it is, where it's coming from, and they're going to spend that on everything else. They might not get an education that will actually get them a productive job in the future because they aren't forced to look at the cost of that loan. When the government's subsidizing school, everyone's going to go to school, and when we get out, we're going to have the same issue with unemployment. So the students who actually want to be there are looking at the future. We should let them be going to school and paying for their own education because they're going to be the ones benefiting when they get their own job.
Thank you. Lena Buggs?
Well, I think everyone should have access to education. It should be made readily available. I think that with this being such a diverse district where we have approximately over 30% who are immigrants, I think that we should put them on an upward trajectory where they're able to become productive citizens. So the way that we do that is that we offer them subsidies in order for them to pay to attain higher education. And I also think that we should also allow teachers to be able to teach various languages within the school system as well. I don't think that as immigrants, if you come in, you're expected to learn English right away.
Thank you. Rena Moran?
I think one of the main things we have to do is really work to ensure that our kids are graduating out of high school. So we have to look at the whole educational system and creating those opportunities and the resources that are really focused and target in on kids graduating, much like what the Promised Neighborhood does around a holistic approach. But we can also look right here in our own district at the St. Paul College, where over 40% of that population are kids, are immigrants and kids of color who are there, who are going through a 2-year program, capable of going on to become really successful. And also the legislation that we created around freezing college tuition to make it more affordable and attainable is something that I worked towards in 2015 to ensure that we are keeping college affordable for all.
Thank you. Our next question will start with Rena Moran, followed by Lena Buggs. What measures do you propose to address excessive force by the police?
What measures? One of the things that I believe wholeheartedly is that it's important is to create coalitions and partnerships. So I have a great partnership right now with the Chief of Police, Tom Smith, which they did a wonderful job of this summer of creating a program, raising funds to create a program for community ambassadors, where community members are going in and instead of the police coming in to do the policing that they do in a negative way, that they are allowing community members to intervene in really creating the opportunities for them not to have records, not to be incarcerated, not, but looking at more of the those partnership and relationships around what I would say does not happen as often in Minneapolis as it does in St. Paul, but building those relationships with the police department is really critical and important to me.
Thank you. Lena Buggs?
I will go on record by saying I will enact legislation that will require policemen to carry body cams as well as insurance when they brutalize members of our community. And after so many instances, you become uninsurable and you lose your job, which should happen if you brutalize members of our community. I also want to go on record by saying that community policing, by the police standards, it isn't happening in the districts. They aren't reaching out to the youth who are under 18 years of age. So I think they have to get out of their cars. They need to come into the communities and work on rebuilding that trust. And I would disagree with Ms. Moran. It does happen as often in St. Paul as it does in Minneapolis.
Thank you. Anthony Meschke?
Yeah, I think the police are focusing on victimless crimes. If there's not a victim, it shouldn't be a crime. The police are out there and they're kicking in people's houses when they aren't hurting anyone inside their house. That's drawing the attention away from actually protecting people from force and fraud, which should be the main priority of the police officers. Every day I drive home from work on the highway, there's cops sitting out there watching for people speeding. Well, what's that doing? When my wife and daughter are at home, that doesn't mean there's a cop driving by anymore because they're sitting on the highway trying to do revenue generation for the city and the state. So they need to get out of their cars. They need to get back on the beat. They need to become peace officers again. No one uses peace officer anymore because they're the police. They're becoming militarized. They're kicking in doors and they are killing people. They're throwing flashbang grenades in babies' cribs in the houses for victimless crimes. I mean, that happens. That should not be happening. Let's see, what else? Stop the federal overreach. They're giving militarized equipment to the local police forces who don't have the training for that. Now every city has a SWAT team. What for? This failed war on drugs that's breaking up families and sending people to prison, so you have single-parent families now.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Anthony Meschke, followed by Rena Moran. What will you do to protect the 19th, 2nd, and 4th U.S. amendments and all Minnesota state amendments?
We should be protecting them all the time. Stop letting the overreach come down and stop singling out people. I mean, they're singling out non-violent felons and they're taking away their constitutional rights to vote and to defend themselves. So we need to defend all of them equally. We can't be picking and choosing and saying, well, the founding fathers didn't really mean this or didn't really mean that. I mean, we need to look at the actual wording of them and stick to them. We should stop forcing people to buy things, which is unconstitutional. We should give the rights back to the states. The federal government is overreaching into the state's authority. So the Bill of Rights was meant to limit the rights of the federal government and not the state government. So I think we need to bring government back down to a more local level, get it out of the federal government, bring it back to the states. The state should be a petri dish of constitutional republics and the democratic process. Instead of having things forced down, have it be brought up.
Yes. What will you do to protect the 19th, 2nd, and 4th U.S. amendments and all Minnesota state amendments?
You know, what I believe is that, you know, when we look at protecting all amendments, which is a struggle for me as an African-American woman, when, in my viewpoint, so many of our constitutional amendments doesn't always serve everyone justly and fairly. You know, so I think, you know, it's times where we have to look at those amendments and folks give different interpretations to those meanings of those amendments. But as an elected official, I will and abide and work hard to ensure that the results of those amendments are fair and equitable and supports the rights of everyone.
Thank you. Lena Buggs?
Well, I agree that I think that all the rights should be protected. However, some of them need to be looked at and they need to be re-examined. A great example of that would be the Voting Rights Amendment that keeps coming up, as well as gun violence and safety prevention that keeps coming up. I agree that everyone has the right to bear arms, but I am worried about safety. And I think that background checks should be used so that the public at large can be protected. So I'm a big proponent in protecting our rights, but sometimes amendments do need to be made to that legislation, and I will support that.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Lena Buggs, followed by Anthony Meschke. What will you do to address the growing number of people at risk of becoming homeless and ensure housing stability for families?
Well, many of you know that housing is one of my biggest issues. Here in our district, we have 1,226 vacant or abandoned homes. Ms. Moran has 3 of them on her block, and this ought not be. In terms of homelessness, we need to enact cost of living wages and take that holistic approach to get people on an upward trajectory to bring them out of poverty to prosperity. So when you look at wages, it's more of a holistic approach. If you earn more, then people don't want welfare. What they want is cost of living wage jobs. Now, currently, there's a $560 TANF block grant. That's the block grant for welfare that the state receives. But if you enact $15 legislation, then people won't have to have welfare benefits, and they won't have to have those certain safety nets. But if we don't create jobs, then we can't complain about people being on welfare.
Thank you. Anthony Meschke?
I'd say the living wages and the minimum wage, I mean, I talked about that earlier where people can't create enough value for an employer, so they're hiring higher skilled workers, union workers, so that disenfranchises the unskilled workers, and then they can't find a job where they can create $15 an hour worth of value. So that's keeping a lot of people on the poverty line. Welfare is so high that it is actually more lucrative for some people to stay on welfare. When they can work, it's more lucrative for them to stay on welfare than it is to go out and find a job. So we need to make sure that the welfare can be used for the people who actually deserve it and will actually be using it effectively to take care of their family. That's what I wanted to say on that. I want to touch on the previous question where Rena voted against your right to self-defense on your own property in 1467, and we should be defending people's right to use their Second Amendment rights. If somebody commits a crime with a firearm, that should be a crime and they should be punished as such. To preemptively think that people are criminals just because they own a hunk of steel in their house, that's wrong.
Thank you. Rena Moran?
Well, investing in housing and investing in homelessness and creating stable and safe environments for children and families is a really big passion of mine and a commitment. You know, over the last 2 years, again, we invested $100 million in housing, you know, but along with that, right here in the community, and because of my advocacy, and because of my involvement in housing, the Rondo Frogtown received over $5 million in state housing fund. This increases the supply of affordable family rentals. It improves options for people experiencing homelessness. It eliminates barriers to home ownership and uses community land trusts to really establish long-term affordable home ownership. So, and also along with converting vacant buildings into quality homes. So working on creating affordable, sustainable housing is a commitment from me.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Anthony Meschke, followed by Rena Moran. What legislative measures, if any, would you support to reform the welfare system and address health disparities in our community?
Could you repeat the question? Sorry, I was thinking
Sure.
about that.
What legislative measures, if any, would you support to reform the welfare system and address health disparity in our community?
Yeah, I support drug testing for welfare recipients. Private companies can do this. I think the government should be doing that. You're using someone else's money that you took from them to give it to someone else. That person's money who you're taking had to take a drug test to be able to pay those taxes. So we should make sure the people we're giving it to are using it for the appropriate things. We should make sure that the welfare payments, EBT, WIC, everything like that, it should not be transferable from person to person. We should make sure that they're actually spending it themselves instead of trading it off to other people and that person goes, uses it, buys it for 50 cents on the dollar. That does happen around here a lot, so we need to fix that. And what was the second part of the question?
And address health disparities in our community.
Health disparities, same thing with a lot of private charities are gone now because the government has tried to fill that role. They can't fill it as well as private charities. Private charities are local and they know what the people need. So we should stop the government infringement and bring back the private charities.
Thank you. Rena Moran?
Oh gosh, looking at the child welfare system and its deficit-based type of initiative is also a very important issue that I work really, really hard on. So when we talk about welfare reform system, I have carried several bills around the child welfare system. But one of the things I want to talk about currently is that for MFIF recipients, what we did for them, because the wages is so low that they receive from the state, is that we created a housing voucher. Because so many of the welfare recipients are women, they find themselves in compromising positions. So that was one thing. And the next is that we also create an opportunity for welfare recipients not to just go find work, but to go to school and get at least a 2-year or 4-year degree so that they can work themselves out of poverty into a living wage job.
Thank you. Lena Buggs?
As a member of the Welfare Rights Committee, I would like the public to know that Rena Moran did not author any legislation. Our group went to her. We asked, first of all, the welfare grants have not been raised in 28 years. So those same payments have been received for 28 years. And again, if you aren't creating jobs, then you have no right to poor bash. Now, we went to Ms. Moran. We asked her to author this legislation. She said no. She said she didn't want to be the token. So in regards to the health disparities, again, I will author single-payer health care to reduce those health disparities. But I want you to know that Rena Moran did not offer that legislation.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Lena Buggs, followed by Rena Moran. Do you support more funding for light rail or other transportation needs?
I do not support any additional funding for light rail or commuter rail. There's been enough of taxpayer dollars allocated towards transportation in that aspect. What I do support funding for is to fix the infrastructure, roads and bridges. And I'm sorry, the second part of that question?
I think you answered it.
Okay.
Other transportation needs.
So I do support the fixing of roads and infrastructures. We had a pretty decent bus system as it was. We definitely need expanded bike paths. We need to make District 65A greener. Thank you.
Thank you. Rena Moran?
So I guess I'm going to piggyback on a statement earlier around the Viking stadiums that, my opponents keep putting out there about my decision to support that, which was one of the hardest decisions that I've made in trying to support. But one of the reasons that I, in the end, supported that because of the high disparities that we have in our communities. And what the light rail did was it brought jobs. As we look back over the years, there has been the economic breakdown of the workforce was in crisis. And so what has happened from that, there has been a 32 hiring goal that was set by the Department of Human Rights for people of color. That is really important to me, that when we create jobs, we're creating jobs for all. And right now, currently, on that stadium, we are at a 38%. We have bypassed at 30%, 32%, and are now finding ourselves at a 38% job goal.
Thank you. Anthony Meschke?
The light rail costs $16,000 per foot. I mean, you could buy every person who's riding that a vehicle just about, and look at the room that the light rail is taking up. You could have fit, 2, 3, maybe 4 car lanes in that space. You could have put in 2 car lanes and 2 dedicated bus lanes. And we're still running buses next to the light rail. I mean, what a boondoggle that whole thing is. Since we have it, I think we should be using it. We should be forcing everyone to the light rail and using that for public transportation instead of paying double. We're paying for the light rail to keep that up and going. It's been hitting people on the road. It's been breaking down. We've had to revert to bus systems again. Let's see, what else? I wrote some. St. Paul used to have private bus systems here. It was a while ago, but it did work. So now we're using government and taxpayer money to fund this public transportation. There were other options out there that the government got rid of. And when these government-backed pet projects like Rena Moran's Viking Stadium that she did vote for, that's taken resources from private companies and union jobs from private companies to
Thank you.
pay for the projects.
Our next question will begin with Rena Moran, followed by Lena Buggs. What is your position on current and proposed types of mining?
Mining. Wow, that is a 65A issue, isn't it? You know, I believe I have the endorsement of the Sierra Club, which environment is really, really important to me. Clean water, clean land, safe workplaces, all that is important to me. And, you know, I believe that as we look at mining and whether or not it's something that we should done, if it can be done safely, doesn't impact the environment, then it creates jobs. And for my members who live in those rural communities, if that is something that they can support and advocate strongly for, then as an urban legislator who is not impacted by mining, I think that a lot of my decision-making process would lean towards those who's going to be impacted by that decision.
Thank you. Lena Buggs?
We are all impacted by mining, whether we know it or not. It affects our water, it affects our land, it affects cognitive abilities in our children. And I will go on record by saying sulfide mining, taconite mining, copper nickel mining has no business in the state of Minnesota, and I do not support it.
Thank you. Anthony Meschke?
I would say it does affect us here in 65A. There's a lot of fracking sand that's going through the neighborhoods on the trains. I don't think we should just ban it just because it's going through there. I think if there is a problem and there is documented cases of somebody being injured or being injured because of that, then we should definitely take actions to protect the people from that. This should be up to the people who are affected by it. If their land is being polluted, I mean, private property rights, if they're being infringed on this, we should make sure that we are protecting them. There are good examples of mines that have been done successfully and cleaned up and put back successfully. Not all of them are, and I acknowledge that. So we have to make sure that we're doing it environmentally safely. Everyone who drove here today, everyone who's using a cell phone, you're using these materials that are coming out of the ground. So if you are actually advocating for no mining whatsoever, you need to change your lifestyle because you are enabling that lifestyle by the choices that you're making. So we need to start using our wallet and stop supporting these companies if that's what we support.
Our next question will begin with Anthony Meschke, followed by Rena Moran. Should felons living in the community on probation or parole from a felony conviction be allowed to vote?
Felons, that is a huge topic. Are you a violent felon, a non-violent felon? What are you talking about earlier about people using EBT cards? I know a person who somebody allowed them to use their EBT card and that was a felony. So now that person can't vote, can't use their Second Amendment rights, they can't defend their family. I mean, there needs to be a huge distinction there. We're labeling people as horrible felons for victimless crimes, and we're disenfranchising these people. So I think we should get rid of all the victimless felons. If you're a pedophile or a sex offender or something like that, I don't think we should be releasing those people back into society. So we have our priorities. If you're in your house smoking weed or doing drugs, not hurting anyone, we're putting you in prison, but we're letting sex offenders out back into our community. I get emails all the time from Ramsey County. This person's moving into your neighborhood, and they put what that person did on that email, and I am disgusted every time I read those. So we should stop that, and we should focus on crimes that have victims.
Thank you. Rena Moran?
Felon voting is something that I've been working on at the community level and at the legislative level since 2008. And I believe that once a felon or ex-felon has served his time, he's back out, or he is back out in the community. They are with their family, they are connected, working, that they should have the right to vote. Absolutely.
Thank you. Lena Buggs?
I think that as long as the crime is victimless, I think that felons should be given their full voting rights. Failed policy, the Minnesota Sex Offender Program, that legislation didn't get enacted due to the mismanagement of the Democrats. They could have passed that legislation and they chose not to. So again, this is more ineffective, watered down policy making. Do we really want 4 more years of that? So as long as you haven't committed a crime against another person, absolutely, your rights should be reinstated.
Thank you. And our last question of the night, we will begin with Rena Moran, followed by Anthony Meschke. What should the legislature do to promote employment in Minnesota, or reduce unemployment?
Well, there's a lot of things that we could do and we need to do to ensure that we have a community of people who are working, who are invested in creating a greater economy for our communities and our state. You know, one of the biggest places that I'm looking to really create job growth is with youth intervention. It takes $86,000 to incarcerate a youth and $2,000 to help them in a community-based program. So what I would like to do is, and it just yields a better return for the community and the state. So I will broaden state funding to cover more grantees organizations. Otherwise, we continue to have these gaps where our youth are falling through the cracks. So it is, again, giving under-resourced communities the resources they need.
Thank you. Anthony Meschke?
We spent the $16,000, which we took from the taxpayers and from the businesses and from the property taxes, $16,000 per foot to build this light rail. And look how many businesses are closed down, how many businesses were injured. I was talking to businesses, My Village, one of them, they said this is the lowest people coming into their restaurant. This is the lowest numbers it's been in 20, 25 years. And now there's construction right next to them on Western, again, tore up the entire road. And they put signs in front of their parking lot so people can park in My Village's parking lot. So that's just one example. Burger King closed down within, 1 or 2 months of the construction starting. It's just government's enacting these things and it's affecting local businesses. And then they're trying to charge the businesses for these policies with huge property taxes, which is in essence telling you that the private businesses are renting their property from the government by paying these property taxes. We need to stop the warehouse type taxes that are business to business, and the government should stop feeling privileged to tax people's income.
Thank you. Lena Buggs?
Well, we need to cut taxes for small businesses. A lot of the corporate welfare has been given to large corporations. Well, we know that small businesses have been income generators for our district, and with light rail coming through the central corridor and closing down and shutting down, in fact, those small businesses. So we have to cut taxes for small businesses. Small businesses also need subsidies so that they can pay people cost of living wages. We also need to do something about income tax. I think that should be lowered as well. And then I also think that we should partner with, community groups to bring in to bring those jobs in that would employ youth and enact a full fair youth employment legislation as well too.
Thank you. It is now time for our closing statements, and we will go in reverse order, beginning with Rena Moran.
So I have had, again, the privilege over the last 4 years to represent District 65A. I have had the obligation and the privilege of introducing bills like FAM, which is a family asset bill. For every dollar that a family member saves, they are given $3. And with that $3, they can become an entrepreneur. They can become a homeowner. They can invest in their education. I carry the bill around equal pay for equal work. 50% of the women who have, in the state of Minnesota, 50% of the women in the state are single-family women. And so having women get paid equally for the work as men is hugely important. Currently, a white woman gets paid 80 cents to the dollar, and Native American, African American, Latino women are getting 60 cents to the dollar. So having women value for the work that they do is really, really important. It just creates for a stronger community, a stronger state, and it just pays and it grows our economy. I'm excited about the work that we've done over the last 2 years to invest in education. Education is the way out of poverty. We've done it from early K to all-day K to freezing college tuition. We need to continue to do that because our young kids deserve to go on to college and find their way and their path out of poverty and not dependent on the child welfare system. That is really important to me. So I am excited about the work I've done over the last 2 years, being in the majority. If you want to create bills and create change, you need to be in the majority. And I hope that as you look at my work record, if you look at the bills that I have passed and co-authored and authored over the last 2 years, that you will give me your support. I hope I have earned your support, and I hope to have your vote on November the 4th.
Thank you. Anthony Meschke?
I hope, as you've seen tonight, Rena's rhetoric is not lining up with her voting record. She says she's advocating for children, but she voted for the forced unionization of child care providers, which raised the cost of child care, and it drove some out of business. She didn't even vote on a bill that allowed the state to store babies' blood without parental consent. And she voted to not pay off the school debt, and she voted to employ teachers based on seniority in a union. She's advocating for raising minimum wage, but many people don't even have a job in this district. She voted to give millions to the Vikings. She voted for light rail, which drove many businesses out of the city also. While she was in, the new Senate buildings being voted on. She's talking about how she wants our streets to be safer, but she voted she voted to eliminate part-time police officers in the state. Let's see. Oh, she voted against your right of self-defense on your own property. She's taking money from each and every one of us, and she's giving it to the government to spend on whatever they want. I believe that everyone out here, we all make up the economy, we make up society, we should decide where our money's spent. Rena says she wants to give the power to the people, but she's voting to unionize small businesses against their will, and she's employing teachers based on seniority. That's direct payback to the unions. As you can see by her endorsement page, over half of them are unions. I don't have any such endorsements from groups like that. I'm going for the endorsement of the people. I want to go to the Capitol. I want to get liberty and freedom back into our lives, get the government out of our homes, and get the government back to protecting us. The police should be protecting us instead of raiding our houses, putting us in jail for victimless crimes. They should be on the street, out of their vehicles, walking the beat, protecting us. We shouldn't be scared every time a cop car drives around. We should be glad when they're driving around. So I'm Anthony Meschke. I hope you can support me. I hope you go to my website, anthony4mn.com, anthony4mn.com, or my Facebook page, Anthony4mn, or Anthony Meschke 4mn.
Thank you. Lena Buggs?
You know, it's real simple, folks. Under the leadership of Rena Moran, we have some of the worst disparities. We have disparities in education, in employment, in housing, and in health. If you want 4 more years of the same pretend progressive policies, then I'm urging you to vote Lena Buggs. Many of you signed my petition. I'm the only candidate who worked hard and got out this summer and had 500 signatures to obtain, and we obtained, with your help, 870 signatures. I will work diligently to make sure that workers do have the right to unionize. I do believe that government does have a role to play, especially if it's collecting taxes from its citizens. I am also the only candidate that doesn't take corporate or PAC money. My contributions solely come from good people like you, the working poor, the poor, senior citizens, the disabled. So I'm asking for your vote. You've heard my platform: cost of living wages, sustainable housing, community-based economics, and ecological wisdom. I humbly ask for your vote. Vote November 4th and vote Buggs.
Thank you. Thank you for participating in the forum this evening. Thanks to all the volunteers, SPNN, the Rondo Library, our candidates, and all of you in the audience. Please stop by the registration table to learn more about the League of Women Voters, and remember to vote on November 4th.